Hi, everyone. This is Debi Ghate with the Philanthropy Roundtable, and we are back for another edition of Can We Talk About It? Today, we have a guest who's from a sector that we haven't talked to yet, and we're going to be talking to someone in the arts. Now, I'm a big lover of the arts. I go to a lot of museums. I used to go to the theater when we were allowed to. Used to love going to see music performances. And today we have somebody from the dance world. And I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. How often do we get to talk to somebody who's the director of the American Contemporary Ballet? And so we have Lincoln Jones with us here today. And Lincoln, thank you for being here. Welcome, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Very much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you as well.
So, Lincoln, you reached out to the Philanthropy Roundtable. We didn't know each other. You reached out to us, and then we ended up talking on the phone. But what made you reach out to us?
Well, over the course of the last year, there was this ideology that was really being pushed hard in the arts. Well, in every sector, really, that I found. It goes under a lot of different names, but diversity, equity, inclusion is one of them. Critical race theory is another, or critical theory in general. When the events of the summer happened around George Floyd, we faced an enormous amount of pressure to take certain actions, post certain things on our Instagram, change our repertoire even. And our dancers were threatened individually. And that subsided a bit in the intensity. But the pressures were such that there were very specific actions you were to take. And they were things that didn't align with our mission, were specifically contradictory to our mission. And then we started seeing a huge diversion of funding, in that you had to sign statements aligning yourself with certain ideologies that were sometimes specific, sometimes more vague. And it seemed to me that both that and what was happening more at large in the country was going to be very bad for society, in my view, definitely for our company, and for the arts in general. And I noticed that in the arts, so many were very, very quick to sign up for this. And there are a lot of people speaking very articulately on the problem as a whole, and I hadn't seen it in the arts. And I don't know how articulately I can express the ideas that I think are important to discuss, that are contrary to these. But I did think it was important that I said something, because of I think some of these ideas can have really disastrous consequences. And so I just started thinking about the way to do that. And, one thing is when around 2016 with the election, when the country seemed to become much more divisive politically, I sort of maintained a policy with the company that we don't engage in things politically. We do a lot of Q&As and things like that after our performances, and sometimes questions would come up, or I think people would say things, and I would always tell the dancers, if this happens, throw it to me, I'm going to move on to something else, because we're not a political organization. Our art is not political in its orientation. And I wanted everyone to feel welcome and not have that. I felt that there was enough of that, and this was somewhere where people could experience something else. And so I've avoided voicing my opinion as well, but things got to such a degree that I thought, if I don't say something, I'm letting something happen that I think is worse than potentially tainting the company by my association or something like that. And so to get around your question, I started looking around and I thought, somebody else has to be thinking this. And I started just looking for organizations in the nonprofit sector at the same time as the events of the summer. Just mostly by chance, we had some resignations and I had to fill positions. And I thought, it's very important that these positions are filled with people that are not bringing this ideology inside the company that I think could be so disastrous. So I found the Philanthropy Roundtable. I was really excited, and I wrote Elise, your president, I believe, and just said, if there's anything that I can do to help, please let me know. And then I spoke to you.
Wow, that's a lot, Lincoln, right? In what you just described, because you took like almost a year of what the country has been going through and shared what happened through your lens. And there's so many things for us to dive into here. Let's start with this, because you mentioned the mission of your organization. So what is the mission of your organization? What does the American...
The mission of our organization is to produce dance of the highest caliber at the basis of it. More specifically, we focus on what I see as the most important and most complex legacy of ballet, which is the sophisticated relationship between dance and music. So we focus on the repertoire of the artists who I see as exemplifying that. George Balanchine is one, Fred Astaire is another. And we strive to that same kind of sophistication. But yeah, so it's to make dance of the highest caliber that we can along those lines.
Okay. So, and mission, your mission is the most central thing to the organization. This is why you exist. This is why people invest in you. So in the summer, when the horrible events around George Floyd happened and everybody, there was an emotional outpouring and a lot of heightened energy, in the summer. Yeah. What kinds of things were you being asked to sign? What's an example of something where someone said, you need to sign this or there will be consequences?
One thing was when we didn't post the black square, which I can give my reasons for why we didn't. A lot of denigrating messages were sent through Instagram. There was a petition circulated, which was demanding changes in repertoire, changes in casting processes. There were 4 specific points in it. They're not coming to mind specifically, but those were 2 of them. There was a prominent Instagram, I learned this through my dancers, Instagram group that had a lot of followers that were telling our dancers they were going to be put on lists. That they reposted a letter of mine that to the company explaining why we weren't doing these things. But in terms of the signing, what I was really more referring to is that then in the aftermath of that, that grants that had not contained this requirement before were now, you had to have a DEI statement to apply for them, which had already actually happened before that, in that we had a particular grant that was partially funding my salary actually, that the second year of it for the renewal came with that requirement. So we didn't sign it. And that was probably 2 years before this all happened.
Wow. So this has been happening, and this is my sector. So I know what you're talking about. Philanthropy has been leading the charge in this, asking, there are a lot of foundations that have taken on the policy of demanding demographic information from their grantees and making that part of their decision-making process. So, and we've been asked at the Roundtable, we're a C3 too, and we have been asked to provide our demographic information, and we declined to do that too. So what has the effect been in terms of your funding? The other thing I have heard is there is pressure on organizations, not just for the casting to be done differently, but for organization leadership to be reflective of these values, right? So it's the first time I'm seeing you. You are a white man, right? We hadn't seen each other before, but there are funders that talk about whether or not to support white-led organizations. Have you experienced that kind of talk, and what has been the effect, from a funding perspective, on your company?
Well, like that first grant, that was a substantial one that we wouldn't apply for because of the requirement. There have been grants which have asked for, as you said, demographic information, which we've declined to supply. One of the big things that is happening in California is that there are relief funds, some specifically for the arts, some more generally for businesses, which both state and private money is being poured into, but it's being distributed with consideration to race. So there was one that said if you have, for instance, a majority female board, click here or something, and we do, but we didn't do it because I don't think it's fair. We didn't hire them because they're not there because they're women. They were there because they're qualified, and I don't want to take precedence over some other company that doesn't happen to have that. And then there's other ones which just come with a very elaborate DEI requirement, but it's under the auspices of relief. And then just in other things, even before this happened, there was a composer who died recently, actually, Charles Warren, who had written a ballet for us. He was actually the youngest composer at his time to win the Pulitzer Prize, very accomplished composer. And I was wanting to commission another ballet from him. And I was exploring funding for that specifically. And I had spoken to one person and I was told, well, let's face it, nobody's going to fund a white male composer. So it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
Wow. So let's dig in a little bit more, because this is in the arts, this issue has become, it's every sector, right? But in the arts, it's taken on a particular kind of form. And there must be people who are critical of a company like yours, because ballet, and that you described the relationship between dance and music, and the type of dance that you are trying to put on. And you refer to Fred Astaire. He's one, I love Fred Astaire, by the way. Could watch him dance all day. So these are being described as they're being described as white supremacist type of culture, right? Because ballet and music have certain origins. They come from a certain tradition. They came from a certain part of the world. Do you get those criticisms? And what do you think? I mean, I'm thinking this has something to do with why you think this critical race theory, DEI ideology could be fatal to a company like yours, right? So how do you think about when people say that? When they say it's racist, what do you say?
So, well, I mean, I actually think it could be fatal before it gets to that extreme of calling it something like that. And I can address that in a moment. But, the interesting thing is, the thing that I have faced or I've come in contact more is not so much you are doing this thing that is racist or is white supremacist or whatever, but people saying you have to fall in line with this or you're going to get killed financially in the press or whatever. It's not been people saying, I believe in this, you need to believe in this too. It's people saying you've got to fall in line or there's going to be disastrous consequences. And so that to me is a little scarier, because it does seem a more vocal minority claiming these actual things. And they usually come in the form of like Instagram comments or something like that. And nobody's come to my face and said this. Yeah. So it's kind of been more almost disheartening to me to see that people are willing to give in to something they don't believe in, rather than pushing an idea that I disagree with.
Yes. Thank you for making that clarification, because I have been hearing about this type of classical music is racist, and I've been hearing that, and there are some university professors who have faced that kind of situation. I see what you're saying. It's almost it's harder because there is nothing explicit maybe to respond to. It's all in a threatening kind of way, and without anything explicit for you to respond to. And a lot of people are going silent, which is one of the reasons we are trying to be take do the hard thing and actually talk about things that we're not encouraged to talk about. You are talking about it. It's got to take some courage because we're talking about funders and we're talking about people that provide the money that makes it possible for your dancers to earn their livelihood, et cetera. But you are actually speaking out. How do you overcome the fear? How do you overcome the threatening, the silencing, or the attempt to silence you? How do you overcome all of that and stay true to yourself?
To be honest, I don't think it's actually courage. I think it's almost pragmatism in the sense that I think where some of these things are heading are so dangerous that to not speak up is to actually would be to put the company, myself, in more danger. I mean, yes, I suppose this could dry up our funding and really hurt the company in the short term. If I were to, do something that would preserve society but kill the company, I would do that, because it's a more fundamental need for survival. And I don't mean to put it in dramatic terms, but I do think it is somewhat dramatic. But in a more personal sense, it is scary. And what I came to, because, you said to my first answer, this is a lot. And it was, but this is mostly what I've thought about for the last 8 months. First, like, what are the issues? What are the arguments? Am I right? And if so, how do I approach this? And it was a long road, but I ultimately came to, and actually it was the articulation of it was this morning, actually not long before the podcast, was that art is a process, a lifelong process of finding one's voice and finding the means to express it. And this has made me afraid to speak. So if I don't say something, it's game over anyway.
That is resonating with me a lot. It's a big part of why we decided to do the podcast. I got to tell you, it is a little scary, but I'm up here with you. And it's where I take hope is there are more people out there who are thinking the way you're thinking, but who are still silent. And I think the only way for us to help people find their voice, and I love the way you described what art is. The way you describe what art is, there are other people, there are other artists out there who need to find their voice again. And the only way they can do that is to see others speak up sometimes. So it is courage. I'll say it, Lincoln. It does take courage. There is a lot of pressure. What do your dancers think about all of this? Are they supportive?
Actually, I haven't told them I'm doing this. I suppose I should. The reason, I suppose, is, actually, when all this happened originally around June, the dancers, almost without exception, were incredibly supportive of the position I took. I sent a letter because they were facing a lot of external pressure. And so I thought it was incumbent upon me to write a letter about the position we were taking that they could share. And, it explained that we're not a political organization and that it's not my prerogative to represent them politically. And I know that the response to that was, well, this is not a political issue. This is a human rights issue. But the way it's being expressed is not as a human rights issue. And even if it were a human rights issue, there are a lot of human rights issues. And it's not the job of a ballet company, in my view, or you can make it, I suppose, the job of a ballet company, but then that's a different kind of mission. And it's not my prerogative to represent them politically. They didn't sign up for the company when they signed their contracts, or for whoever I work with, even if it's volunteers, the agreement wasn't, I agree with you. I like the art you're making, and I agree with you politically. So, I think that they have agreed for me to represent them artistically, but not politically. And so I explained that, and I said, you're all, thankfully, we live in a society in which you're all free to do that individually, and I encourage you to. They were all very supportive, and some of them were calling me in tears because of these lists. I don't know if you remember, there was also an LA Times article on a woman who had made a list of theater companies in LA who hadn't, not just if they hadn't said something, but if they hadn't said it fast enough or said enough. And so they were very scared, and the dancers. And at the time, I didn't sugarcoat it for them. I said, I think this is going to be bad, and I think might get worse before it gets better. But there was someone said, this isn't going to last forever because it's unstable. They said it might take down Western civilization with it, but it's unstable. And the question is, how do you want to have acted when it was happening? And for me, I couldn't sit and watch other people who were facing such enormous risk fight for these values that were so important to me, and just say, well, I'll let them take the hit and hope this blows over. So for our dancers, it is the founder of the organization, and it's my responsibility to lead it. And I truly believe that this is the best thing that I can do, even if it does mean a risk to the company itself, because the company's at risk, period. Nothing's going to change that.
And the way you put it, it's lost anyway if you don't speak on this. So I have two more questions for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I told that whole story with the point of saying that I had a Zoom chat with the company at that time. And I said, what is it that you would like me to do? Do you know my position? Do you want me to, because the company has a podcast as well. And I said, I really don't like mixing these two things, but I could go on another podcast or something. And would you prefer that? And I think that almost unanimously, they said they did want me to do that because they wanted views clarified. I had explained that I don't think clarifying these views is going to remove the pressure. It might increase it, but they did want that at the time. And so that was their response.
Well, I'm really glad that you asked them and that they were, they had a chance to voice their concerns. And it says something about you as a leader that they were calling you and expressing themselves, even at the point of tears, about what they were experiencing. So it does take leadership in those moments for sure. Lincoln, I'm curious. There are two more questions I have for you. One is describe this ideology as being dangerous, right? For people who may not understand why something that sounds like a positive, right, where we are addressing equity, we're addressing equality. There are some values that run alongside that message. Why do you see this as a dangerous ideology? Because I look at you and I'm talking to you, and you don't seem like you're a radical of any kind. So why do you think this, as a person who runs a ballet company, why is this a dangerous ideology?
Looking back over history at identity politics and over the philosophy of identity politics, the ideas behind it, I don't see a way that it doesn't end in disaster. I don't see any time in history that I can think of where it helped or didn't hurt drastically. In some cases, lead to the most, horrible violence. I'm going to borrow an analogy which I thought was very apt that I heard the other day, which is that I was hearing someone on a podcast who is, I think they may have been from Lebanon, and they said that Lebanon is unique in that the identity politics, the stuff that's the quiet part, is not dressed up there. The different roles of government are explicitly stated. They have to be of this religious sect or whatever it is.
I heard the same podcast. I know which one you're. I heard the same.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
And I just thought it was very apt because he said, and it leads to house fighting. And I think another way to put that is that another podcaster that I haven't listened to as much, but she said something that has really stuck with me, Chloe Valdery, if I'm saying her name right. And she has a program. There's a lot of anti-racist programs going around now, and she's got one that's a little bit different. And one of her core tenets is don't reduce people to a political abstraction. And I think that anytime you reduce someone to a singular quality and you encourage them to see them that way, and you encourage people to see themselves that way, or you encourage people to see their natures as defined by that, it's a recipe for tribalism. And I think that art, classical art, especially ballet, what I'm trying to do with ballet, the thing that I think is most interesting about ballet actually is the individual dancer. And it may look like from the outside that ballet fosters conformity because you have to learn these very, very specific ways of moving. And in lesser hands, I think it can become that. But in the hands of the greatest creators, I found it's a tool to give one a command of their body in such a way that it can become this sort of perfect vehicle for the expression of the soul, or even better, the soul motivated by music. And the thing that's so special about a great dancer, or that's so rare about a great dancer, is not that there aren't a lot of great dancers, there are, but that each of those great dancers is great in this very individual and specific way. And, they'll never exist again. And Balanchine was very, very good at this. He was very good at finding out who that dancer was in all their complexity, all their limitation even, and fostering that thing into incredible beauty. He used a lot of gardening metaphors. These flowers would bloom, and to look at that and to see this singular reductive quality is to miss the point entirely. So to me, it's just antithetical on an artistic level to what someone is trying to, what the artist is really meant to do.
I just learned a lot from how you described dance and art, and actually found myself forgetting to breathe as you were talking, because that was you're putting into words what one experiences emotionally when you're watching an amazing dance performance. Why is it that we get emotional when we are watching an individual express themselves through movement and music, right?
Right. And I think, in fact, any art is really about kind of this direct soul-to-soul connection.
Yeah.
And, with these ideas that are being proposed, make even the most pedestrian intimacy difficult.
Well, we do actually have Chloe Valdery coming on the podcast.
Oh, great.
So yeah, the theory of enchantment is one that we've been following as well. And there are some really great lessons to take from her work. My last question for you is, so we work with funders, right? At the Roundtable. What is it that you want funders who are thinking about these policies? What do you want them to know about the effect that it has on the nonprofit world?
Well, I think that the reason, I'll speak to arts specifically, I think that the reason we value art is because of the individual voice. The reason that you want to buy a Picasso painting, and the reason that might resonate with you more than another painter, it's because of someone fostering that individual voice. And to start dictating how artists need to think and need to create will diminish, if not destroy, that voice. It might even discourage people from going into it because they're seeking artists, I think, really above all, are seeking an avenue of expression. And if they learn that the field of art is not a place where that's possible, they're not going to go into it. And so I don't think you want to set limitations on artists if you want the value of art. And so I would say that that's probably the most salient thing that I can think of right now is as to why, if you're looking to support arts, you would want to be careful of doing it with dictums of an ideological sense.
Yeah, you're right. And I can't, as you were speaking, I was trying to imagine, I started to feel like, what would the world be like without art and without the kind of art that sort of replenishes all of us? And that would be devastating. So that would be devastating. So I really applaud you for having thought really hard about the issues first, not just, picking up a megaphone like a lot of other people have and shouting the first thing that comes to mind, but having really thought through the issues, having really internalized what this means for you, for your dancers, for the company, for our society, and then deciding that no, what you in your quiet but confident way, sharing with us what you think and why it's important for you to speak. So really appreciate that you came and talked about it. I look forward to more conversations. And I think there are other people who think like you, Lincoln, and that they will find their way to you. Is there a URL that you want to share for the ballet?
Oh, sure. It's acbdances.com.
All right. Well, I hope people will go check that out. I know I will. If there are virtual things that you all are doing, I'm going to sign up and make sure I buy a ticket. So, Lincoln, thanks for being here. And we wish you so much. And we'll stay in touch.